Hi, welcome back to Kalike. We are doing yet another session on mechanics. So we are going to talk about scalars and vectors. Now, before we straight away go on to define what are scalars and vectors, if you remember in our previous discussion where we discussed different kinds of motion along a straight line, it was very easy for us to describe the direction in which a given object or a point object was traveling. Why? Because we were basically talking about motion along a straight line. So what do you mean by that? So you are basically talking about motion along a straight line, right? So that means it is either traveling along the positive x-axis or it is traveling along the negative x-axis, right? So it is either positive or negative. So when we had to deal with directions in that class, we only spoke about plus or minus signs, positive direction or negative direction. Negative direction is the opposite of the positive direction. So we did not have to bother much about directions. So either it was a positive direction or it was a negative direction in which a given point object was traveling. But that was the case in motion along a straight line. Now, in reality, we have objects moving along a two-dimensional space or a three-dimensional space. So what do you mean by two-dimensional space or three-dimensional space? Two-dimensional is across a plane, any object traveling on an XY plane. If I'm talking about three-dimensional plane, it is definitely I'm talking about the X, Y, and Z axis. So what happens? How do you define directions in such cases? That is where we introduce the concept of vectors. We refer to those physical quantities where you define certain directions as vectors. Why are they termed as vectors? Because there this analogy of just giving directions as positive direction and negative direction fails. You can't just say it is positive or negative. For example, if it is traveling in space, let's imagine if this is the south, north, east and west directions, and you have an object traveling like this from point A to point B. How will you say whether a positive direction, negative direction? It's not possible. So you'll have to say the direction. If you take this as the origin, this is the positive y-axis, negative y-axis, positive x-axis, negative